Welcome to United by Trucks. Today, no fancy intros, no fancy B-roll. We're just gonna bring it to you straight today on what to look for when you're going to buy a Squarebody. We're gonna start right here with this 76 shop truck or future shop truck that we call Philpot. So I picked this up from a supporter of the channel. His name's Lee, lives down in Hogansville, Georgia. Picked this up from him, I think in early 2019. This truck had sat for a little while. It's a factory short bed, original paint truck, straight six, 3 on the tree, nothing fancy, but it sat for a little while. So it's got plenty of rust, and we wanna really talk to you, and Rocky's behind the camera. So Rocky and I really want to talk to you about what to look for from a rust perspective, or maybe even from a unique option perspective. We'll talk a little bit about that more on Rocky's truck, but with this truck, we want to talk about the rust. So we've got this example of a 73 to 80 Squarebody in the shop. We've got the Blazer, which is an 81 to 87. We've got Uncle Buck, Mike's truck, which is an 81 to 87 truck. And then we've got Rocky's truck, which is a 73. So we'll be taking a look at all 4 of those and just talking a little bit about, you know, the rust areas, the problem areas, and what to look for on these trucks when you're going to buy them. So let's jump in. So we're gonna start right here in the engine bay since we got the hood off. And the hood is a critical thing that you wanna look at when you're going to look at a 73 to 80 truck, because a lot of times they kink right here in the center because of the hood hinges being all rusty and dried out. So one thing you wanna be cognizant of when you're going to look at a 73 to 80 Squarebody is to make sure that when you lift the hood, you make sure that the hood hinges are oiled or not so rusty that when you put the hood back down, it's going to kink if it's not already kinked. The hood on this truck was already kinked. I'll show you a little bit about what it looks like. It's actually in the bed of the truck. But Rocky, if you'll walk right here real quick, some of the worst that I've seen from a Squarebody perspective as far as rust. This truck has a lot of rust in the firewall. So you've got this little area here by the wiper motor, and then you've also got it running all the way across the main seam of the firewall where the top of the cowl and the firewall come in. So basically check this area to know whether it's got rust in the firewall. I know most of you know this, if you know anything about a classic truck, is you want to look in the rocker area. So this truck in particular has quite a bit of rust in the rocker. One spot to really pay attention to is right here below the seat, where the seat hump is. This one is particularly rusted out at the bottom of it and toward the rocker as well. And while we're down here at the rocker area, another problem area for square bodies, especially in the 73 to 80 era, is rust in the bottom of the doors. So we see this a lot, obviously, in 67 to 72s, but you want to check the door bottoms, and right here where the bottom of the door and the edge of the door come together for rust, this truck obviously has plenty of that. Another area is on the bed sides. This truck does not have rust in this area, but oftentimes you'll see rust on the in front of the rear wheel, and then the rear of the rear wheel. Oftentimes see it, especially back here. For some reason, as much rust as this truck has, this one does not have any in the bed area. But be sure to take a look in front of the rear wheel and behind the rear wheel to check for rust. Now, let's walk around to the other side and I'll show you where it really gets problematic. So now that we're back at the front of the truck, we're over on the passenger side, and I'm sorry we got a bunch of stuff right here that's going on some future projects, but you want to look under the battery tray in the front of the fender. Obviously this one is very hard to miss, but it's got a ton of rust in that front fender cup. We see this on 67 72, 60 to 66s, and we definitely see it on square bodies as well. You see it much less in the 81 to 87 year range on square bodies, but you definitely see it on the 73 to 80s, and this one has it. Another area would be right behind the front tire and wheel on the bottom of the fender as well. You'll catch some rust there. And then this one also has it in the rocker and along the bottom of the door. So that really, in my opinion, encompasses what to look for when you're going to look at a square body from a rust perspective. I want to take you over to Mike's truck and show you a little bit more about how a rust-free truck looks, even one that's got a bunch of surface rust on it. So we'll run over here to Mike's truck, take a look at that since it's up on the lift, and then we'll go from there. So we're walking up on Mike's square body. This is an 85 or 86 dark navy truck, but I want you to look at some of the areas that we just pointed out on the Philpot truck that have rust that you don't see here, or you know, that are the problem areas from a rust perspective that this truck does not have any. Obviously right here behind the wheel wells, nice and clean. Also in front of the wheel, and then here you can see the rocker is nice and clean as well. The reason I'm pointing this out on this truck is because this is a truck that has a lot of surface rust. It's an original paint truck, but yet it doesn't have any rust through. And pictures can be deceiving when you're looking at a Squarebody online and you see a lot of surface rust like this truck has, and you might be thinking, wow, that could be a rust bucket. Well, it could be, but in this instance, it's not. I mean, you can see here, front fender cup. Now this is on the driver's side, not under the battery, but the front fender cup has no rust. Behind the rear wheel has no rust. It has a little bit of surface rust, but no rust through. And we'll walk around and check out this side as well. So this is right under the battery. There's no rust in the fender cup there, little surface rust. And then the battery tray and all that is nice and clean as well. So when you're looking under the hood of a Squarebody, like we were talking about, you want to obviously inspect that battery tray and then the firewall. You can't really tell as much about this firewall because it's up in the air, but this one's nice and clean. And then you can see here, that's just a lot of dirt for where Mike's been driving this truck a lot. So you can see here behind the front wheel, there's no rust in that fender, and then the rocker is just as clean.
Now, since we're under here and we've got Mike's truck, Uncle Buck, up in the air, I'm going to touch on some things because mine's right out in front of the shop, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to get it up in the air for you guys today. So while we're under here, and I can show you some things that are kind of rusted on mine that you really want to look out for. First thing that you notice up under Uncle Buck here is that everything's very solid. You know, the frame is solid, the floors are solid. Now on mine, you have a cab mount right here, okay? On mine, it's completely just rusted through. The spot welds here on the side, those are non-existent anymore. However, that does not affect the structural integrity of the truck. Really, honestly, what you want to look for up under these trucks are the cab mounts, the structural cab mounts. Are those cracked? Are those pitted in any way, you know, by the frame where everything's riveted in and bolted in? Do those have any stress cracks? Do they have anything like that?
What makes that so important is that's what connects your frame to your cab.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you don't have, you know, if you've got rust or structural integrity issues there, then that's something that you want to,
and that can be a huge safety concern too.
Yeah,
and also that can give you a lot of problems, you know, especially if you're coming from like a budget build aspect, or, you know, it's really going to depend on how deep your pockets are and how much time, you know, that you want to commit to this thing.
Yeah, and I think it's also, you know, just if you're talking about going and buying a used truck, it's also a point of leverage. It's not that you want to, you know, you always want to get the best deal you can, but it's not that you want to rake somebody over the coals, whether you're the seller or the buyer. But if structural components like the cab mounts are compromised, then that can be a point that you could bring up to the seller and say, you know, that's going to cost me a little bit of money. You know, that's going to cost me some extra time I wasn't anticipating. Can we knock off some money because of those issues?
Absolutely, absolutely. Don't let rusty floors deter you. You know, AMD, they make great products. You know, of course, it's going to take a little bit of time to put them in. You know, you want somebody who knows how to do something right so that when you're going down the road, you know, welds don't break, things
Right.
like that. But, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's really not.
Just knowing what you're getting into is half the battle. Knowing where to look, what to look out for, that's really where you want to put the investment. If you don't want to put money into a truck that's got some rusty floors or some rusty rockers, then, you know, obviously don't buy it. But the way we roll around here is we're not scared of rust. I mean, we don't have, you know, these crazy budgets. We oftentimes, because we're in the South, there is quite a bit of rust around. So we can get a cool truck, an original paint truck, with some rust for a lot less than we would a truck that's maybe even been painted or doesn't have any rust or has been repainted than we would with those. So I think that the rust component is something that, you know, just know what to look for, know what you're getting into, and then decide if that's something you want to bite off.
Come on, take a look at this. A lot of these trucks, you know, that have been, you know, everyday use for 40, 50 years, they're going to have stress cracks in high movement areas. So one of the key components, to look out for is where the Saginaw steering box mounts up to the frame. So a lot of times what will happen is over time, from the torsion of you turning the wheel and the frame twisting, on that turn point and that stress point, the frame will crack. So a good way to find out, if your frame is cracked, when this thing is on the ground, don't be afraid to rock it. Don't be afraid to shake it or anything like that. When you lift the hood up and you're looking at the radiator where the radiator mounts to the frame, you'll see it move. If it's moving or if you see that box moving, then you know your frame is cracked.
Another simple way to look for that is just with the truck on the ground, slide your head right under the front and shine a light up in here. And if you see any cracks where the steering box mounts to the frame, you might want to use that as a leverage point to get a better deal, or you might want to walk away. And while we're under here, this truck has a lowering kit on it, and it has a quality kit on it. It's not all dolled up and super fancy. As you can see, Mike just recently replaced these leaf springs with a factory set that have some surface rust. But one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at a truck that's been lowered, you want to check out the C-notch, especially if it's been lowered 5-6 inches or more. You want to look at the C-notch and how it's been cut out. You want to look and make sure that the notch is fitting within the frame well, and make sure that the frame hasn't been overcut, that it's not lost a lot of its strength and rigidity. Another thing to look for, particularly on a square body truck, this is not a big investment, but shock extenders on a square body, even with drop shocks, can make a big time difference in how your truck rides and handles. So if you look under a truck and you see these little brackets here that extend the shock mounting point down from up in this area to down here, you know that somebody's actually thought about it or knows what they're doing when they drop the truck. So take a look at shock extenders, take a look at how the axle's been flipped, what the leaf springs look like. You want to make sure that the shackle is in good condition, that it's not warped. You want to make sure that this angle here at the leaf spring is in the factory position. We've seen where people heat up leaf springs and bend this back to get a little bit more drop out of it. So let's walk over to this other frame and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So these are actually the leaf springs that came out from under this truck. So you can tell how steep this angle is at the back of the leaf spring. You want to make sure that you know what you're looking at, and maybe not buy a truck that has that steep of an angle on the leaf spring. Somebody had obviously wanted to get a little bit lower, so they heated this up and bent it back. And in my opinion, that's just not that safe, because you're messing with the structural integrity of that leaf spring. Thinking about a truck that's already got a drop on it, and you're in here taking a look at it, you can see here that those are new coils. So these are coils that have not been cut, they've not been heated or anything like that. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a cut or heated coil, but you should know what you're looking at when you go look at a truck like this. These trucks have been on the road for a long time. A lot of people have been manipulating them, so just know what you're looking at when you go and look at a lowered square body. Okay guys, so we're out here now looking at Rocky's 73, this super sweet little 73 stepper that's got some rust, but one area that it doesn't is on the hood.
So as you notice on this hood, you can look all here and you can look up under it and you notice that there's no rust at all. The little seams are good, and a lot of times what will happen is these are two-piece hoods. So you've got an outer skin and then you've got the inner structural component that's kind of spot welded in. A lot of times from over the years, from people pulling this thing down, it's habit that people will pull them towards them. Yeah. But, everybody knows that you have to push in on these hoods. And
on the 73 to 80 hoods specifically.
Yes, otherwise right here, you'll get a nice little kink in there, and we like to affectionately call that tacoing the hood.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about this is it has not been tacoed. So you can tell that these springs, all the hinges and stuff down in here have got plenty of oil. They're not super rusty. They're not gonna fail you in a way like the ones that do when you kink your hood. This is a family truck for you. This truck's been in your family for at least 2 generations now. Mm-hmm. So you kind of, even though it has rust, you know a lot about this truck.
I know so much about this truck. This truck has been apart numerous times, and you know, minus the rust, which is getting fixed, by the way. It's getting fixed.
That's right. Thanks, Evan and AMD.
You know, everything on this truck has been rebuilt.
Yeah.
So structurally, it's sound, you know, and that's one of the things, you know, when I had it is when it came back into my possession, my sole possession,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that the frame wasn't cracked, you know, like what we talked about earlier on Mike's truck. I made sure, you know, and you can get a better vision of it here, you know, Robbie, if you want to come right here where I am, you can see where that box mounts up to the frame, you know, and a lot of times, you know, if you move it around, you know, you'll notice that the frame will shift and move around if they're cracked, which mine's not. You know, thankfully. The
86 crew cab we call Gus, that's completely stock and sitting at home, by the way. We're probably not going to Duramax swap it. It's just too cool of a truck like it is. But that happened to me. I got it home, I started digging around, and I realized that there was a hole in the firewall, just pretty far down below the wiper motor. And that was something I did not expect on a truck that's that clean. One thing I would be cognizant of is we're talking about trucks that are original paint or trucks that we've had apart and been under, but trucks that have been painted, you know, you really want to look for Bondo. You want to look for those areas that are a little wavy, and you want to look in all these specific areas we're talking about and see if it's still got the factory rocker in it. See if it's still got, you know, the factory fender cup in it. Those are just areas that you want to take a look at when you're going to purchase a truck.
From a buyer's perspective, there's several different options and things that you can look for on these old trucks, you know, that, you know, maybe the seller might not know what he has, or not saying that, you know, you need to pull a fast one on somebody, but
you need to know what to look for.
You need to know, hey, I've got something that's pretty cool, or I've got something that's kind of one-off. You know, for instance, on this truck started out as an original DOT, State of Georgia DOT truck. You know, looking at it, there's key things on this truck that I've found out that was meant for maybe a supervisor.
Yeah,
or
supervisor,
like
foreman,
that.
something like that.
Yeah, for instance, you know, you've got the wood grain panels. You know, that was an option that did not come in every single truck. Another interesting thing is, and I'm still trying to figure this one out, is mine's an automatic, and it's had the shifter converted into the floor. However, the brake pedal is for a 3-speed, as if it was going to be a manual truck.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the big wide fat brake pedal. So that's just another kind of weird oddity.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've taken the liberty of doing is I was able to locate an original factory tack, and this truck did not come with an original factory tack. So what I was able to do was I was able to take the old boring original custom deluxe gauge cluster with the dummy lights, idiot lights, warning lights, whatever you want to call them, out, that usually sit right in this area here. And I was able to put in this nice new to the truck factory tack.
New to the truck.
Some other options, you know, that these trucks will have, you know, obviously the original tack clusters, those are a really, really hot ticket item. They're extremely rare to find. You'll see some variants of those. Primarily, you know, you'll see them in like the C70 trucks, the bigger trucks that had air brakes, and those will usually show up and they'll have a little, the fuel gauge will actually be right here, you know, not over there in the left, bottom left, right there. Right there in that position that I just showed you will be a vacuum gauge for the air brakes. So that's just another thing to look out for in case you're interested in finding one, or you do find one and you're like, hey, why does this have this crazy vacuum gauge? That's why. So just a little thing to note. Also in the cab here, we have a radio delete. This had no radio, so that's another cool little thing that sets it apart from all the rest. And of course, no AC, you know.
Smooth dash.
Smooth. Nice and shiny, smooth.
One of the other really cool options that you can get in these trucks, and we don't have an example of it here. We have a little bit of an example I'll show you in the Blazer, but you can get buckets and console in these trucks, and they'll look similar to what we've got going in the Blazer. In the early trucks, you'll have the low back buckets like we have here, and then in the 81, 87, actually maybe even still in the 73 to 80 range. I want to say maybe it's 75, 76, 77, somebody correct me down in the comments, but they would come with the high back buckets. So the low back buckets are obviously more desirable. These were high back buckets we cut down, but you can see the console and the 2 bucket seats here. So Rocky, anything else you're thinking of from a perspective of, hey, I'm new to square bodies, or hey, I'm going to look at a square body?
You know, like with everything else, just do your research. And you know, these trucks, you know, they're still around for a reason. You know, don't be afraid to bang on them. Don't be afraid to, you know, put muscle into them and check the frames and check the panels for Bondo and things like that, so that people won't pull a fast one on you. It really does depend on how deep your pockets are and, you know, how much time and effort that you want to put into it. You know, this one was stock, completely stock, you know, and it's taken me about 3.5 years to get it to where you see it now. And that's from lowering it, you know. Engine trans swap. It's got a built 700 R4 in it. Replacing everything mechanical on it, you know, to make sure that it's structurally sound and, you know, so that I can go down the road at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, and rust repairs next.
And rust repairs next. So, you know, just understand that it's going to be a project, you know, and just have fun with it. That's the biggest thing. Have fun with it, because that's what these trucks are meant to do. You're meant to have fun with them. And, you know, another thing I can say is just drive your stuff.
Yeah, man.
Just drive it.
And enjoy it with your friends.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Thanks, Rock.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you tuning in to this episode of United by Trucks. I hope this kind of helps you understand a little bit more about what to look for when you're going to look for a square body. We covered rust repair, we covered some unique options, we covered suspension, and I really just want you to sort of digest what you've seen here, share this with your friends, let them know, especially if you've got somebody who is considering buying a square body. Definitely send them this video and leave a comment down below. Let us know if there's something else that you look for when you're going to look for a square body. We appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Smash that like button. We'll catch you next time right here on an episode of United by Trucks.
Cue the music.